today to discuss both the similarities and the differences in Wabash students' motivation for voting or not voting in the past presidential elections versus the last fall Wabash student body elections.
To come to a conclusion on the question at hand, there were 140 willing Wabash students that were interviewed, surveyed, and were asked a series of open-ended questions about why they did or didn't vote in their past involvement in both the United States and campus government elections.
With that being said, for student government especially, we found that 79 out of the 140 students tended to vote for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that because the election revolved around a smaller population compared to the presidential election, 35% of the students that voted felt a higher sense of civic duty to cast their vote and to voice their opinion. The second reason is that students felt like their vote for student body candidates had a more significant impact in the election, which helped motivate their surge to go out and vote. With that being said, we also found some trends with voting due to how easy the voting process was. 8% of the students that voted commented that the reason they voted was because the voting process only took about 10 seconds and that they were able to do it on their phones. 25% of the students that voted felt obligated to vote because they had close ties or knew the candidate that were running for student body. In the presidential election, we found that students too had similar reasonings why they participated in the presidential election. Of the 76 students of the 140 that participated in the presidential election, a majority of them, around 53%, thought this was an important election. This ties into the first reason for voting. 18% of the students voted because they wanted to voice their opinion. Much of these responses were about how they did or did not like a particular candidate, and how they wanted to make sure that they did or did not get elected, which ties into the same beliefs of the 11% of the students that voted because it was their civic duty to do so.
Let's shift gears to talking about how these results translate to the rational choice model of voter turnout. For student government especially, we found that students tended to vote for a couple reasons. One, the outcomes of policies and votes enacted from this election will directly affect me, so I care a lot about the outcome. And two, my vote actually matters in the outcome of the election. In other words, my single vote is not some minuscule number. In the presidential election, we found that students voted because of how important they found this race to be. And as mentioned before, they wanted to voice their opinion on a particular candidate. So how does all this relate to the rational choice model? For the student government elections, the respondents thought that this race directly affected them, so they wanted to vote. This would be the P times B in the equation, being the probability your vote actually counts times the direct benefits you receive from a candidate winning. In the presidential race, it was more about the secondary benefits. Some voted for their civic duty, or they were raised to have pride in voting, so they did it. This would be the D in the equation. With all this being said, there were some surprises that we came across, and another piece of literature that we think fits into this study as well.
In conclusion, we found surprising trends from our research, like how around half the Wabash students interviewed did not vote in the student election, even though it is as easy as tapping a button on their phones. This is similar to Funk's research in Switzerland with mail-in ballots, lowering the opportunity cost of voting. It also made it easier to avoid voting by not having any type of repercussions because no one knows if the individual truly voted or not. When students did vote, it was because they thought their vote made a difference and it affected their everyday life. This contrasts the reasons why students voted in the presidential election, where the reason was more due to the students feeling it was their civic duty and that it was an important election. This goes along with the protective model of democracy, where most people have their own self-interest in mind. If they see a candidate they like, they will make an effort to vote for them, no matter if it is on their phone or if they have to go to a polling place. Wabash students mainly vote because they feel it affects them personally, if that is in everyday life or if it is to satisfy their needs of being a citizen and completing their civic duty.